Another world history lecture video for Mr. Rhodes' ninth grade world history class. Today in this video, I'm going to try and get us all the way through the notes for Greece, all the way to Alexander the Great. All right, on this video, as you guys see anything that's underlined, you need to write that down. That will be what I'm checking as a grade in class. All right, so you may need to hit pause to do that. Just make sure you get all the notes that are underlined. All right, so on Friday we looked at a map of ancient Greece, and on Monday in class we are talking just a little bit about the geography of Greece. So to introduce Greece, we need to think about its geography. All right, first of all, when we talk about ancient Greece, this was a collection of separate lands where Greek-speaking people lived. This was not necessarily a unified country at this time. All right, in fact, it was simply this region where everybody spoke the same language. They had a relatively common culture. They had pretty similar religion, right? But this was not one country. All right, it's surrounded by the Mediterranean Sea, more specifically the Aegean Sea, the Ionian Sea, and then to the north, the Black Sea. Okay, water is very, very important for their transportation. All right, also, and you want to write this down. Ancient Greece lacked natural resources, so trade is very, very crucial to them. Right? They're constantly going to be trading and interacting. They are going to also rely on the ocean for most all of their food. Right? So it's a very, very big deal for them in ancient Greece. All right? It's also very mountainous, which makes transportation over land difficult. All right? Causing them to travel mainly by using the water. Because it's mountainous and rocky, it's not suitable for large-scale farming. All right, they did do some farming in Greece. They actually did a lot of farming, but there was never enough good farmland to sustain a very, very large population. All right, weren't going to be able to do a lot of irrigation. All right, because of this mountainous aspect and just because it's hard to farm, they're going to develop as small independent communities. Okay, these independent communities have a common culture, they interact a lot, but they're not going to turn into one big empire. Okay, so Greece is small independent city states. It's a very mild, moderate climate around the Mediterranean. Average temperatures around 80 degrees Fahrenheit. It doesn't get too hot in the summer, but it doesn't really get that cold either. Right? They're going to spend a lot of time outdoors. Okay, when we talk about earliest Greek civilization, the earliest civilization is called Mycenaeans. Right, around 2000 BCE, we think these Mycenaeans settled in this region of Greece. At this time, we know warrior kings ruled. It's also at this time that we believe the legendary Trojan War occurred as well. All right, we're not going to talk about that much. That's the story of Odysseus and Achilles fighting King Menelaus, Helen of Troy. All right, that's when we think that battle actually happened. We don't know much about it. We think it actually was a battle fought over trading rights and rights to the Aegean Sea, but we don't really probably think it happened the way it did in the story. All right, after the Mycenaean age, the Dorians moved into Greece. They were less advanced. They didn't have a written language. Right? This is known as the Dark Ages of Greece. All right. During this time, people are going to learn about their history through spoken word. Okay. This is also the age of Homer. It's during this Dorian time period, sometime around 1000 BCE, that we believe Homer, who was a blind storyteller who would wander around from village to village, telling his great epic poems, told the stories of the Iliad and the Odyssey. Okay, around 800 BC, we know writing returns to Greece, probably because the Phoenicians, who invented the alphabet, started trading there more. Also, people are turning to farming, population's getting bigger. We have the rise of city-states. Another thing happening around 800 BC is iron is cheaper, so poor farmers can now afford it. All right, we see the rise of these people called hoplites. A hoplite is simply like a Greek soldier. All right, so during this time, we also know that more and more people can afford weapons and can afford to protect themselves, which might be one reason why, especially in Athens, all right, people saw themselves as equal and formed democracy. Right. So first, we're going to talk when we talk about ancient Greece. During this golden age of classical Greece, there are lots of powerful city states. The two most powerful are going to be Athens and Sparta. Okay. First, we'll talk about Athens. It was by far the largest city in ancient Greece. It was kind of in a valley between some mountains, also right along the coast. There's a lot of fertile land here. So Athens could sustain a large population. They actually had some resources there, marble, lead, and silver. They're going to use that marble for a lot of their beautiful buildings and statues that we know them for today. What Athens is most famous for is being the first democracy in the world. It was their idea to have a democracy. All right. Democracy is where all citizens have a say in the government. They're not ruled by a king. They're not ruled just by the rich people, but all citizens have a say in the government. All right. In Athens, anyone that was a citizen actually could meet, and they all voted on every issue independently. So you could really say they were a direct democracy. They voted on everything. Now, when we talk about it, though, only male landowning citizens were even considered citizens. This means no women have rights to participate in government. There's also a lot of slaves and foreigners living there as well that didn't have the same rights as landowning males. We know that they also had court systems. People spoke in their own defense in front of juries that were made up of just other Athenian citizens. All right, so we could say the birthplace of democracy is Athens in ancient Greece. All right, they had a very rich culture, very famous schools and colleges, specifically. There was a scholar, a philosopher named Plato who started one called the Academy. People came from all over to study here. People would meet in the marketplace, which in Greek they called it the Agora, where they would shop and meet each other. We also know in Athens that athletics were very important as well. Okay, the next one we're going to talk about is Sparta. Okay, if you guys all can see Sparta on this little map. Sparta was also a very important city-state in ancient Greece. They rose to become a powerful city around 800 BCE. The way that they actually rose to become powerful is their next-door neighbors, the people from the city Messene, or the Messenians. The Spartans actually conquered the Messenians. They conquered the Messenians. They made them basically their slaves or made them work for them. And so the Spartans ruled over these other people who a lot of times served as either slaves and farmers for them. Okay. The thing about this is the Spartans were it was a pretty small city, right? They were outnumbered by these Messenians 8-1. All right. If you're going to rule over people and there's way less of you, what should you probably be good at? All right. The Spartans were really, really good at fighting. So Sparta, it was really a military state. All men served in the Spartan military. All right. They spent their whole lives training for battle. Their government, they were ruled by two kings, so one could go to war and one could stay and rule in the city. All right, they also had an assembly that was made up usually of rich citizens. So a lot of people could participate in the Spartan government, but ultimately they were ruled by kings. Okay, but in Sparta, their most famous thing is being great warriors. All right, fighting on the ground. All right, boys would leave their home at the age of 7 to go live in an army school where they would be taught how to train. At age 13, All boys would just be sent out into the wilderness where they had to prove themselves and survive. Around the age 14, they became assistants to older soldiers, and they actually could become a full-fledged soldier around the age 18. Okay. So the men were so occupied with fighting. Because of this, Spartan women actually had a lot more freedom than women in Athens. All right, the Spartan women could run the farms, run businesses. They could even own land. They were also encouraged to exercise because the Spartans wanted their women to have healthy Spartan little boys, baby boys. Okay, so they wanted their women to be in shape. All right, Spartan women, while they didn't have all the rights of men, they did have a lot more rights than women in Athens. So was there equality in Athens and Sparta? Quite frankly, no. In Athens, women had very little rights. In Sparta, they had more rights, but they still were not always considered equal. Okay. Also, both of these places had slavery. Most families would own at least one slave, especially really in both Athens and Sparta. So there was not really equality in Athens and Sparta. Okay. Moving just to broader Greek culture. All the Greek city-states, one common belief they shared is that healthy citizens help strengthen the city-state. Okay, they had these athletic events every 4 years. All the city-states who were very frequently fighting each other would decide to stop whatever wars they were doing. They would go meet in the city-state of Olympia, and they would participate in the Olympics. All right, their best athletes would race each other. They would have boxing matches, wrestling matches, horse races, chariot races. All right, these were sporting games to honor the king of the gods, Zeus. All right, they had all different kinds of events, and this is the Olympics that inspired the modern day Olympics. All right, we also get from Greek culture, we really get see the very beginnings of drama. All right, the very first theater. All right, they originally would have these plays in a holiday every year to honor the god of wine and partying, the god Dionysus. So they would meet for a week long. They would drink a bunch of wine. They would eat a bunch of food, and they would watch as the best playwrights would put on their plays. Right, so we have tragedies that are about a flawed hero. They're serious dramas. We have comedies, right, making fun of people. This is the very first theater that we ever see in history. All right, and there's a lot of plays from this time that we still read about or people still act out today. Okay, another thing we get specifically from Athens are this legacy of the great Greek philosophers. We've got Socrates, who was first. He was basically this old man that would go around and just question everybody. He got on some people's nerves. He made them think and question so much. He was actually forced to kill himself. All right, they forced him to drink suicide because they found him guilty of going against the Greek religion. But he inspired a lot of students. His best student was a guy named Plato. All right, Plato founded the Academy, this famous school. He also wrote a book called The Republic. And then his student was actually another great philosopher called Aristotle, who might have been the best known out of all three. All right, we also very much know a lot about ancient Greek architecture and art. All right, we see this awesome Greek sculptures. We see beautiful Greek buildings. In fact, what you see in this slide right here is the Parthenon in Athens. It was the building built to be a temple to the Athenian patron god Athena. All right, a lot of these temples are built to honor specific gods, but we see a lot of Greek statues where they're trying to show their idea of the perfect human being. So this is another thing that the Greeks give us today that still affects us today. All right, here's some examples of some beautiful Greek artwork. All right, and we'll talk more about some of these in class. All right, so we're going to go ahead and stop this video. Our next video, we're going to talk about the wars and the rise and fall of the city-states of ancient Greece.